Welcome to the Into Novus Knowledge Agronomy Podcast, your go-to resource for agronomic insights, technology solutions, and ongoing education. At Into, we combine agronomic expertise from soil analysis to best practice application methodologies to provide a holistic view for your yield optimization. Our focus is on practical strategies that improve efficiency and drive better results in the field. Join us for interesting discussions, expert advice, and the latest advancements shaping modern agriculture. Whether you're in the field, on the road, or at your facility, we're here to keep you informed and ahead of the curve. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today, I'm joined by my counterparts, Derek Cottrill in Northwest Missouri and Rodney over in Illinois. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, Nick.
Doing good. Good morning.
We got a lot going on in the field right now, but I thought maybe we'd start with just a few brief updates, kind of roughly where you guys are at right now. I don't know if you want to start, Derek, and work our way over to these.
Sure. So we've had quite the last couple of weeks since our last podcast, primarily in terms of wet weather, but overall planning's is complete, other than there's a few guys spotting in some replant situations where we got oversaturated. The rain continues for the most part quite a bit. I mean, looking across my territory, we're anywhere from 2.5 to even in certain spots 6 inches above normal, which in some cases hasn't been a terrible deal. Now that we're getting heat, plus the moisture in the ground, the corn's really taken off, and the soybeans are catching up too. They seem to be creeping along quite a bit, but we're definitely hitting those critical stages in both corn and soybeans where we're kind of getting our final chance here to get weeds cleaned up and starting switching gears to in-season fertility and things like that.
Awesome, man. What about you, Rodney?
Yeah, so we're talk about a tale of 2 weeks. So 2 weeks ago, I was saying you were dry and things were beans were kind of sitting and corn wondering. Well, now we turned on the rain spigot, like Derek was talking about, and we're getting. We had some 3-inch bursts in spots over the weekend, and now we're calling for rain every day, and we have heat indexes over over 100 degrees, and so things changed, and that's why it's called Mother Nature, and that's why it's called farming. But our beans needed that rain and the heat, and they're coming on strong. Same way with corn. I did just FYI, and I saw some things yesterday that we went from being so dry and then we turned on the water and we had a little bit of corn looking droopy, or what I call it the pineapple stage that you see in summer when it's hot and dry. And in talking to Nick and some others, we're thinking that might have been starving a little bit of oxygen. But I noticed this morning it's come out of it, but yet it's rolling because we've got humidity at 90% and it's already 80 degrees. So crop is looking excellent, though, even though we've had some Mother Nature things thrown at it. Very, very good looking crop, but as Derek says, the window's closing for getting weeds cleaned up, especially in beans. Guys that waited, the beans aren't really big enough, I'm going to wait. Now we have some big weeds that we're going to have to get on as soon as they can.
Good points, guys. Appreciate the updates. For me, it's kind of, I mentioned it last time, but it's kind of all over the board. We've still got planting left to do for the most part. Most of the corn is in, but there's a few pockets still struggling to get that planted. First crop beans are still getting planted. Now we'll say, we're kind of down to the short rows on that, but there are some wetter areas that still have significantly more to get finished. It's just kind of been one of those springs trying to fight the rainfall to get things planted and get them in. Has been somewhat a struggle, but that said, quite a range as far as growth stages. We've got corn that's I've heard some stuff on some sand that has started to tassel. We've got other stuff that's getting closer on the very earliest planted, all the way down to stuff that's just emerging. With the vast majority that's probably in that V11 to V6 range, which would encompass most of the April and the mid-May stuff. But we are all over the board. Still some guys with stuff left to get planted on corn. A lot of herbicide apps have happened on, I mean, pretty much done on that April corn, but happening on the May corn now. And then as far as soybeans, yeah, we're all the way from R2, the earliest planted stuff that I've seen, all the way down to vegetative and stuff just emerging. So that's all over the board as well. Derek, I think that probably the growth stage stuff probably brings up a good chance for us maybe to talk a little bit about growth stage cutoffs when it comes to weeds. I know that's weed control has been a challenge for us, and it's going to continue to be a challenge. And we're really pushing the envelope in terms of growth stage cutoffs on some of this stuff. So I don't know if you want to jump into that a little bit.
Right. Yeah. We're probably not quite as variable as you are. I was in a lot of V8 corn this week. I'm sure there's some V9 out there, type of thing, but we still, I mean, I'd say anywhere from V4 to V8 would cover 90% of the fields that I've been in. But it's just a reminder once we get to that, what the crop's doing at that point. When we get that V5, V6, we're determining kernel rows around, and then beyond that, that's when our rapid growth is getting ready to start after V8, that rapid uptake of nutrients, where our peak demand for things like sulfur, nitrogen, and potassium per day is going to spike up. And in terms of herbicide applications, there's not a lot of things labeled after V8 or 36-inch corn, type of thing that doesn't require a very specific herbicide or even drop nozzles and different things like that. And some of that is due to the agronomics of it. I mean, when we get at later stages, it's going to be just that much harder to kill weeds. And when we're trying to spray a corn crop that big, but also, like I just mentioned, after that V8 period and that rapid uptake of nutrients, that's where additional stress is going to start impacting yield to some degree. And it's just best if we can get those fields cleaned up before that. So be aware of your stage as we're going in here, because there's a lot of corn that's reaching the point where there's not a whole lot that would be labeled to spray on it, nor would you want to, given what the crop's trying to do, what the corn's trying to do in terms of yield determination. Now, on the bean side of things, that I think the biggest misconception we've had there, and they creeped along pretty slow, relatively speaking, in May. They're going along good now, but just remember, we don't really stage beans off size at all, right? And so I've got 4 to 5 trifoliate beans out there that got a flower on them. Once they get that flower on there, they get to R1, similar to V8 and corn. There's not a whole lot labeled. There's not a whole lot labeled in soybeans, maybe up to R2 at best. But once we hit that point, regardless of the size of the beans, even if we're not close to canopy, things start getting off label. And that's why, even if we got fields where beans, they look small, but once they get a flower, they hit the reproductive stages, and the beans start switching gears in terms of what potential yield impact stress will cause. And so, things like making sure we're getting our residuals put down on there since we're so far away from canopy, because we're not going to have the opportunity here in the next week, 2 weeks especially, to come back in with something if we miss something right now in beans, because we'll be well into the R stages at that point, even though I don't have a whole lot of beans out there that are right close to canopy. So just something to keep in mind.
And Derek, you mentioned in corn V8 or 36 inches. How do we measure the corn for 36 inches?
Right. So I go, well, just from that very top leaf, because personally what I've always done, instead of the whorl, I guess the tallest part of that leaf where it bends over all the way to the ground level.
And the only reason I call that out is some people want to extend the leaf up, but I've always the same way. I've always where the uppermost leaf bends over. That's where you measure. So, yeah. But I truly would want to stage it by collars, by leaves, so that you got a true, so you know exactly where that plant's at in its life cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just Yeah, for everybody listening, just keep in mind too, those on the labels, most of the time it's whichever is more restrictive, whether it's growth stage or its height. And I don't know what you guys have found, but generally in my career, April planted, even May planted corn, generally the growth stage is the most restrictive, but you do get into some of the June corn and you can't get to that where that height gets more restrictive than the growth stage. Um, so just, yeah, keep that in mind, folks. It's always good to be sure to know how to growth stage it as well. With that said, I guess I would also just kind of hit on that what Derek was talking about. I'm going to have a lot of stuff that with all the rainfall we've had that's going to get cleaned up later than it was planned on, especially in corn. And yeah, just keep in mind that Roundup thing is real. Like, the label says V8 or 30 inches, you can go through V8 and up to 30 inches broadcast. Otherwise, then after that, you have to go to drops, I think up to 48 inches. But that's real. It can cause jumble deer syndrome where you're missing kernels because theoretically 25% of the kernels are not Roundup resistant. And so you put glyphosate on too late, you can kill some of those kernels that are susceptible if it's still in its system whenever it's pollinating or metabolizing it. And that thing is real. I've seen it many times in my career where people pushed it, let's say to V10 or something. You can see the effects of that later on in the season on the ear. So I just a word of caution, I guess I would say. I do know that there are places that I know you've got messes and you got to clean them up and you got to do what you got to do. So not going to belabor that, but just make the comment that if there's not much to go after and you're just throwing in the tank just because that there's can be some circumstances or some consequences to doing that. So I appreciate Derek bringing that up. But as he said,
Well,
yeah,
Nick
there's not.
mentioned to go hand in hand with that. After V8's when we got to be careful with surfactants and causing arrest of deer and things like that. So if we are going to go later than V8, we need to be careful about what surfactant we have in the tank.
Yeah, spot on. I was just going to mention too, like you said, there's not much labeled past V8 that's legal to broadcast. Most of the time we have to go to drops. There's a couple of things, but not much. So yeah, just keep in mind once you get to V8, things get pretty restrictive. So yeah, good call out too on the adjuvant piece of it. With that said, yeah, that's all I wanted to get into on the growth stages, especially when it comes to herbicide cutoffs and going in late. I'll also say on the bean thing that yeah, you can cause some yield loss from burning the heck out of the beans in the reproductive stages. We don't do as much of that anymore, but yeah, just be mindful if you got something at R1 and you go burning the heck out of it, you can cause some yield loss. Um, then just wanted to get into kind of a jerky transition here, but get into nitrogen loss a little bit. With all of us now, we're wet. Some of us have been more wet than others, and so nitrogen loss becomes something that's top of mind, something that we're all thinking about. Just when you have a lot of heavy rain like this, it's going to be something that you have to be mindful of. And I'll let you guys jump in here wherever you want, but I'll just say we had lots of fall anhydrous that went down, probably way more than normal or the last couple years, anyways. You take that with heavy rains in the spring, and then especially as we push planting further and further back, I mean, that is a recipe for some huge nitrogen loss. And I've just run some scenarios within nitrogen model within adapt in, just kind of looking at some of the effects where we're at. And some of my geography with some of that fall applied anhydrous, we're showing as much as 100 pounds of end loss this spring with some of the heavy rainfall events. Now, keep in mind, that's not all the nitrogen we put on. There's some free nitrogen in the soil that's mineralized from organic matter that's being included in that loss. But yeah, for the most part right now, it's calling for like a pound for pound. So if I want 240 bushel corn, it's calling for me to have 240 pounds of N on there. Now there's a lot of variables, a lot of stuff to take into account. So I'm really generalizing. So don't take that for gospel, but just saying that it's calling for a lot more N than it normally would. Um, and I guess Derek, maybe I'd bring this up because we were just talking about it yesterday, but nitrate sampling. It's a tool that some people utilize this time of year. I guess maybe what are some of the caveats or some of the watch outs with nitrate sampling, soil sampling, Derek?
Yeah, well, I think you just mentioned there a lot of different variables beyond it. Yes, we've had, I mean, in some of my territory, historic rainfall events. But in terms of how much nitrogen am I going to lose from that, tell me your soil type, your organic matter, how much have we mineralized from organic matter. It's not just because we have big rain, doesn't mean we're going to have nitrogen loss type deal. And so, you know, nitrate sampling can be a tool to try to get a non-subjective number, in terms of what I potentially lost and what I'm, utilize that number to adjust my top dress rate if I need to. But my thing is, and a lot of the stuff in my area is getting so late now that we're needing to go ahead and do those top dress applications. And so for the most part, I've been telling guys to still stay the course with their original plan. I mean, and not just nitrogen. I'm seeing probably more leaf striping with sulfate leaching, as much as I am anything with nitrogen at this point. And so it really is a case by case. If that corn's still early enough and you want to do some nitrate test just to try to gauge what we've lost or what we still have, that's fine. But it is there's a lot more that goes into it to determine how even accurate that number is. And really, you're taking one or two samples per zone to try to represent the whole field. That's another issue with it as well. So I guess I don't necessarily discourage somebody from doing it. I just caution them to utilize that as the gospel, like you said. And in most cases, we can, depending on our soil types and stuff, we can stick with our plans. Now, if you did fall anhydrous and you're planning on coming back with another 40 pounds and say your anhydrous wasn't treated or something like that, we could probably use a little bit of logic to say, you know what, with all the rain we've had, historic rainfall, let's bump that up to 60 pounds instead of 40, type deal, depending on our yield goal and what our historical yields are, though. But I would just be very cautious about taking a nitrate test and using that as the only tool to determine whether or not you need a top dress, because a year like this, we know you need to do it. It's just a matter of how you adjust that rate.
Yeah, those are good points. I think for me, the nitrate sampling, I've used it a lot before in my career. I think it's a good added tool, but you have to take in a lot of the other variables, like you said, and the other thing you have to realize, it's just a snapshot in time, so it's just for that day. It's still not telling us what's going to happen the rest of the year. And like you said, if you take one nitrate sample on a 120 acre field, that just gives you for that one spot. It doesn't tell you across the whole field. But to me, the best indicators in my mind are just, if I'm a guy that wasn't planning on side dressing, I really have to think through, okay, have I had a lot of heavy rainfall? Did I put my anhydrous on in the fall? Even if I used a stabilizer, it's still a long time for it to be out there. So heavy rain, fall applied in late planting, typically in a year like this means a lot of nitrogen loss. And so I do know that, the cost is expensive. Commodity price is not high. So you really got to watch the budget, the pocketbook. But my experience, if you feel like you need more nitrogen in your program in a year like this, you probably do. And so, yeah, if you've had a lot of heavy rainfall events, you've planted late, you put on fall applied in, you probably lost a decent amount of it, and probably a good idea to think about adding some more little rescue app in season. But like Derek said, if your plan was already with a side dress pass, then you're probably in pretty good shape. Might just want to bump up that rate a little bit, depending on how much you got on, what your yield expectation is. So probably beat that enough. That in lost time.
I'll make a comment,
Sure.
guys. So a couple other things in a year like theirs, where the economics and you've just had a lot of variables thrown at you. No, your farms that are drained well. The farms that are historically your higher yielders. The hybrids you're using. So this is a year where you could get kind of granular, and maybe you're not going to do all your acres, but you do have some farms that are historically high yielders. You've treat them that way. And I think this is a year that you could be prescriptive on what farms get extra nitrogen, and not because the inputs are higher. You think it through a little harder than you had. If you had planned on doing your nitrogen, I totally agree, or top dressing, I totally agree Derek and Nick, this would be the year that you would up it some pounds because of the dynamics that we've been through and the water. So I think this is a year you really need to study your operation, and maybe you don't do every farm if you weren't planning on it, but others you probably do, and you probably up the amount of nitrogen that you were going to put on in already a planned pass.
Yeah, good points, guys. So I guess another topic with all the rainfall, just high humidity, lots of precip. I think to me, you start thinking about diseases, especially with corn. And this corn's starting to push closer and closer to the early stuff, closer and closer to tassel. And I think I don't know about you guys, but I mean the hot topic that probably didn't hear much or anything about last year in my geography, but we had the year before was tar spot. And I know yesterday, bad example because we had relatively high temperatures yesterday, but we are supposed to cool back off this weekend, this next week. And I know it's June, so the temperatures will ramp back up at some point. But cooler temperatures, a lot of precip gets me thinking about tar spot. And I'll just mention the folks on here, and then Rodney or Derek, whichever one, if you guys want to jump in. But tar spot favored by cooler temperatures, 60s to 70s, will be in that range early next week. You need 7 hours of leaf wetness. We've got that check. You also need greater than 75% relative humidity. We've got that check. So you take a susceptible hybrid, and man, it could cost it a lot in terms of yield. Now there's a lot of summer left to go. We could dry off, lose the humidity. It stops it. I'm just making the point that we've got a lot of conditions that are lining up for not only just tar spot, but disease in general. And so there's going to be a fair amount, especially if you have some early planted corn, stands look good, looks good overall. There's a lot of potential yield to protect, especially in a year like this. And Rodney, I don't know if you want to mention anything. Obviously, you've had a lot more history with tar spot than we have, but we had a pretty bad outbreak in 24, but I know you got more history than that.
Yeah, so the other thing to remember for us in our territory, it's here. It overwinters in the trash, um, the fodder, and mornings like this when you come out of the door and you got to cut the air to get out of the door, um, that is prime for tar spot. And last year, we didn't have a lot, but we had it, and it came in late because it cooled off, and then we've got the host, we've got everything you just said. All the boxes are checked. It's just it's stars have got to line up, but it's here. It's just an animal that's going to be here forever now, and you just got to manage through it. But the other thing to remember, and we'll probably parlay right into bugs, but a lot of this goes hand in hand. And when bugs feed, they create an infection site, and then tar spot loves partners. So gray leaf, if there's tar spot, there's 9 times out of 10 gray leaf. Northern corn, you've got a bug bite. There's just a lot of factors involved that make this a very, very good disease year. And then beans, we're talking corn, but beans, this fungal diseases and your powdery mildews and those kind of things love this kind of weather we have now. So sometimes we get wrapped up on tar spot because tar spot can be devastating. I'm not downplaying it, but we also get diseases in beans that we can't physically see, and we need to be cognizant of those too.
Good points, Rodney. I will say on the tar spot piece of it, I think I maybe mentioned this before, but the highest yield loss I'd seen to disease was southern rust. It was like 80 bushel. That was until tar spot came along. And in 24, I had a couple instances where side by side comparisons, it was 100 bushel with tar spot. So on a really weak hybrid in a really good year for tar spot. So it could rob a lot of yield potential in a hurry. Yeah, Rodney, bring up gray leaf spot. That's kind of a perennial problem for us in the river bottoms, especially. But yeah, if this year continues the way it is with this humidity, we'll see it on a wide scale on the upland as well.
The
Derek,
other
I don't
thing
know.
I'll say on tar spot guys, not only the yield robber, is standability. tar spot will just decimate a crop. And today your crop standing today, a couple days later, it could be down because of tar spot. So it's a disease not to take lightly. We are not sounding the alarm bell. What we're saying is there's all the ingredients for the recipe for tar spot. So we need to be prepared.
Eric, anything you want to add there?
I think you guys nailed it. I don't think my territory would be much different there. Obviously, we've had the moisture, we've had the cooler conditions, and then the warm conditions. The inoculums here, I guess the only thing I'd add to that is just make sure you have a plan and if you need to adjust. I mean, whether it's southern rust or tar spot, I mean, people are tracking that stuff pretty hard. We're just going to have to be diligent. As I mentioned on the staging earlier, our corn's getting into a point now where yield stress impacts on yield are only going to increase here for a while as we get closer to tassel. And so, make sure you have your original plan of your fungicide around that tassel timing, but utilize your agronomist and your retail partners to help you monitor that. And if it's moving in sooner and we got a punt, we need to go a little bit earlier, go a little bit earlier. But being proactive is going to be important.
Good points, guys. And yeah, the insect piece of it, Rodney, you brought that up, so we'll transition pivot there quickly. I won't spend a lot of time on it. You guys can add any other insects or things that you want to, but I mean, I think about this time of year, we're getting closer to early corn tasseling. The Japanese beetles are the one that generally eat up all the talk this time of year. And I think we all, at least in Missouri, we've had enough experience there. I think we know now, in corn generally, they're they do less damage than what all the hype is about. And I'm not a big insecticide guy with the fungicide on corn. There may be some instances where you should, but generally, I'm not big on that. Japanese beetles, I always tell people I think there's maybe been one time in my career where I actually thought they caused some yield and probably should have been sprayed, but generally they congregate on the end rows and clip the silks off, but the silks regrow so fast they rarely ever, in my experience, rarely cause any kind of pollination miss, and so I just don't get that worried about it. They're extremely mobile too, so if you flush them out one day, they can come back in the next couple pretty quickly. The threshold on those in corn, 3 or more beetles per ear, silk clipped within a half inch, pollination less than 50%. I'll generally say that it's usually the scare of the hype is usually doesn't amount to much. So I'm not too concerned about them. Now in soybeans, I think generally they probably do a little more damage than we give them credit for in beans. That threshold, 30% defoliation before bloom, 20% during bloom. So you can kind of keep your eye on those. They do seem to be more congregated in soybeans or clustered, I guess. I don't know what you guys have seen, but generally some areas of the field worse than others. But yeah, sometimes they can feed pretty hard on some soybeans. So that's one thing to watch or to be mindful of.
If you anybody listening or you guys have a linden tree in your yard, that is a pretty good indicator of Japanese beetles. They love linden trees when they're waiting on the corn crop or the bean crop. Well, they're in my linden tree. So that tells me we're gonna have a bad bug year because I'm several days or weeks away from pollination in corn. So Mother Nature once again has, if you think about heat units, bugs emerge by heat units, and we've stacked some heat units really fast this year. So and the fireflies have been out, the June bugs are out. I mean, everything leading up to bugs in the crop, they're here. And so I don't want to once again sound like I'm crying from the rooftops, but bugs are here and we've got to be cognizant of it.
Yeah, good points. I'll say, yeah, the last couple of years when we've planted early, got stuff planted early April, some cases have outpaced the Japanese beetle emergence. But you're right, Rodney, not going to happen this year, especially with all the late planting. The last one, I'll just mention this quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. If you're in Missouri, you probably heard about it a couple of years ago. Pretty quiet last year. That's the disease corn stunt, which is vectored by the corn leaf hopper. It has to migrate in from the South, like Central America, and make its way up here. I haven't heard of any catches yet of them. I know they're kind of monitoring. at MU, different sites across the state. I haven't heard where they've caught any yet. But it vectors this virus, after it vectors it, it's about 30 days later after infection that you can see some symptoms. I didn't see much last year in 24, though, especially with some later planted corn. You could see some of the effects of it. Generally, what I saw were the shriveled up kernels where it kind of looked like sweet corn, but it also can cause some poor pollination, cause some leaf symptomology. It was worse in later planted corn in 2024. It's new to North America. 24 was the first time we've talked about it, but it's been in South America for a while. And down there, they talk about yield losses anywhere from 5 to 100%. So it's a wide range. I just bring it up because of that late planting piece. We're still planting here in June. That infection period anywhere from emergence to tassel, but they generally say the most critical is that VE to V5, so emergence to V5 to protect. It just begs the question, I know they're doing some research on it. I haven't seen a lot of data, but the later planted corn, when you're posting with a herbicide, does it make sense to include an insecticide? That's a question I don't really know the answer to. That doing that, and then if it got later or got drier later in the season, that could promote things like spider mites. But is it worth it to take care of the corn leafhoppers? That's a great question. I don't know. Most entomologists would probably tell you to scout and see if you see any leafhoppers, but it is a question that begs asking. And so, anyways, just bringing that up with a lot of June corn that's going to get planted or still getting planted. With that said, guys, I think that's probably enough for now. I don't know if you have any last minute parting thoughts that you want to bring up.
Now, from my end, I just say continue to be diligent. Realize what stage you're at and what that crop's trying to do at that time. And like I said earlier, we're reaching that time where stress is going to be way more impactful potentially on yield than it has up to this point. So just be cautious when you're going out there. Crop's in a lot of sensitive stages, and right now is the time to give the crop what it wants, type deal, so it can focus on adding kernels per row, or for the soybeans reaching the reproductive stages as well.
Appreciate it, Derek. Rodney, got anything last minute?
No, you're spot on, Derek. Just be cognizant of the crop you have. Up here, we have a very good crop, very healthy crop. We just want to help it get to the end, and we get to this time of the year, it's emotional on, man, do I want to put any more money into crop? But if you've had a plan and stick to the plan, then the plan will reward you.
Well, thanks, guys. And thanks very much to everyone listening to us. And we look forward to speaking with you next time. Thanks. Thank you for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Into Novus Knowledge. Please reach out to your Into agronomist if we can help in any way. Join us next time for more in-depth agronomic advice.